How we doing? It's IB Countdown to Kickoff. We're getting ready. Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. This weekend, we had some breaking news this afternoon. Vince Pete Thamel from ESPN was
Oh,
the first to report it, and I've seen other outlets report it since, but Georgia Tech will be without Haynes King, their quarterback, going into Saturday's game against Georgia Tech. We'll get into that in detail in a little bit, but I thought we should just go ahead and mention it right off the top since we're hitting record the same day that just within a couple hours really of this news coming out today.
it is. I guess you could say it was somewhat expected, but at the same time, until you actually hear it, you've got to prepare for the starter just the way
Yep.
you would normally prepare. Obviously, and look, as the coaches would say, the hay's in the barn. I mean, they've already prepared, for Haynes King, but they can easily, adjust and adapt for the new guy. But this absolutely changes the outcome or the outlook of this game as far as being an analyst is concerned. I mean, it's this game just went from the possibility of being a competitive game to I don't think it should be competitive at all, to be perfectly honest with you. So that's where I'm at. I know it's just one player, but this one player makes a big difference when it comes to what Georgia Tech can do offensively. As I said in my prediction write-up that's over on irishbreakdown.com. Haynes King is the straw that stirs the offensive drink, and without him, the offense is it's a shadow of itself. So it changes things dramatically.
Completely agree. I think that it could. I honestly think it could get pretty ugly Saturday. Like we were doing another show earlier today and heard, well, Georgia Tech can still run the ball. Well, part of their running game effectiveness is Haynes King, and at least Haynes King's ability to still pass the ball as well. He has over 1,500 yards already, this season. And I feel like there's just such a big drop off from QB1 to QB2. Zach Pyron does have some experience, but there's going to be a lot of drop off, and I just feel like Al Golden's squad is going to be able to eat quite a bit tomorrow.
I completely agree. This is the kind of game that you get excited about when you're a defensive player, right? I mean, this guy is not really going to hurt you, and so you just pin your ears back and you go get him. And I think that Al Golden, that's kind of his. I hate to say it. No, I don't hate to say it. But that's kind of his MO anyway. Is wreak havoc, get after the quarterback, things like that. And this is just going to make him turn it up even more. Defense is going to have a heck of a day. That's what I foresee happening.
Well, again, we'll get into this a little bit more detail in a little bit. I talked to Chad Bishop from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He covers Georgia Tech. We'll hear some of his comments from earlier in the week about both quarterbacks, both Haynes King and Zach Pyron. But first, I think the biggest news for Notre Dame, well, not I think, the biggest news is no Benjamin Morrison. The cornerback is out. And long term, there's obviously a big impact not having Benjamin Morrison. It's a big deal. When you think about this game specifically, especially now with Haynes King being out, it's a little bit less, just in terms of who they're going to have out there on the field.
Like, am I less worried about the fact that Benjamin Morrison isn't going to be out there? Is that where we're?
Yeah.
Oh, look. Leonard Moore had more pressure on him when he played against Louisville than he's ever going to have playing against Georgia Tech without their starting quarterback. I mean,
right.
Look, their wide receivers are okay. I mean, they're Division I wide receivers. They're legit wide receivers. But I don't care how good your wide receivers are if your quarterback can't consistently get them the football. And Leonard Moore is just look. If we learned anything from him playing against Louisville, the kid is just good. He's coming downhill. He's playing with his hair on fire. Like he's maybe as a coach, he's a little bit too kind of crazy, to a degree, right? But this is gonna play right into his hands because look, Georgia Tech is still gonna try to pick on him. They're still gonna try to go after him. And, if you had Benjamin Morrison, obviously you'd feel better about the situation. But I got a lot of faith in Leonard Moore and what he's going to be able to do too. And I think that, pick on him at your peril, I think is going to be kind of the buzz sentence for me going into this game. It's like, go ahead, you can throw it 15 and it may work once or twice, but he's going to get you. And it could be electric when he does.
Yeah. And I mean, as we've talked about this week, going forward, I think the biggest question now becomes Notre Dame's depth in the secondary. And I think it's going to be interesting because, again, we had like some questions about this in the mailbag. Do you think about flipping a wide receiver over and, maybe trying to make them a cornerback? I'm not sure there's anyone on the roster who makes sense. I think it's more probably about maybe looking at some other guys in the secondary and see, whether it's okay now if Jordan Clark is going to provide more depth as an outside cornerback, does that make Hurd, does Hurd play the nickel more, or do you look maybe at one of the safeties to play the nickel more, those kind of things rather than, necessarily, moving some other guys, especially from an offensive position back over to defense midway through the season.
Yeah, I mean, there could be some cross training, I think, going on. I'm sure that is currently going on. I think that I'm not worried about that unless there is another injury, obviously. And, you got to be prepared for that if it happens like in game, obviously. And they've shown that they can put Jordan Clark over there and do some different things, with some guys that they have. I don't think we're moving positions just yet. I don't think that's the spot that they're in yet. If there's another permanent injury, then you have to look at maybe moving somebody over. You know what I mean? Like right now, I think it's more of a cross-training situation. I think one more injury and now you're moving people. I think that's kind of where they're at as far as the cornerback position is concerned, because you do still need bodies, whether it's practice or otherwise. You still need bodies. And you cannot also expect Gray and Moore to play the entire game either. That's not what you want. And so you have to have faith in your depth as well, whether it's just one guy that can play both spots or, whatever the case may be. So I think they're pretty confident in Carson Hobbs to maybe be that guy right now. And I think that'll probably be okay. But again, one more injury, and now you're having to really kind of analyze your roster to figure out, okay, which direction do we have to go here?
And the other thing is, in terms of immediacy, is you've got a triple option team coming up next week. So it's like, it's not as crucial, I guess, right now. You still have time to maybe experiment a little bit more if that's what you feel like you need to do. Because again, we're talking we're talking about depth as opposed to someone who's going to be an impact starting type guy now if we're moving guys around.
Sure.
Howard Cross and Riley Mills, they had been kind of MIA for a little bit. They really showed up last week against Stanford, huh?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. And you and I talked about it during our weekly shows. For those of you that don't watch 5 o'clock every single weekday, except for Fridays. Right. But no, we definitely talked about it. And it's definitely still true to this day. It's like, look, those two guys were expected to be the juggernauts in the middle of this defense from day one. And we were all excited about them coming back and what they were going to bring to the team and their leadership and their expertise and, all of these different things. And there's been flashes from Howard Cross here and there. There hasn't really been flashes from Riley Mills. He played good against Louisville. He played great against Stanford. And I think this is the first time that we saw that duo play great together at the same time. And we saw the effects of that, right? So this is the duo that we anticipated seeing week 1 on, and it took until week 6 to get there. Now you just hope that they're going to build on that and continue to get better and continue to be difference makers up the middle, because with the injuries that Notre Dame has sustained, both in the front and the back, you need that to happen. Like you can mask a lot of things if you're just getting a ton of pressure up the middle. And so,
that's where I was going to go next. And like, if you look at this game specifically, Georgia Tech's going to have a better offensive line than Stanford did last week. Just for starters, they've only given up the 1 sack so far, through to this point in the season, and they've played one more game than Notre Dame, but they've only given up one sack. Now, Haynes King has been a part of that, just like Riley Leonard, because of his mobility. But at the same time, you got a young quarterback out there. And if you can continue to get pressure up the middle and, shove that pocket in the face of a young, inexperienced quarterback like Pyron in this game, that will go a long way.
Completely agree. I love that I was able to set you up like that.
Teed it up right up. Smacked it out of the ballpark.
That's right.
Offensively, are you convinced that the offense that we saw last week, it now becomes the norm for Notre Dame? Where are you on the offense? How sold are you right now?
Okay. You use the word convinced. No, I'm not. I feel like I want to say talk to me at about 7:30 on Saturday night. And if I see the same offense, the same foundation that they built and built on it, right? Then I will say I'm convinced. It was great to see against Stanford. That's what, again, I kind of harken back to what we just talked about with the middle of the defense, right? Or I should say the middle of the defensive line. It's kind of what we expected to see from the get-go from this offense. And we never really saw it. We saw little itsy-bitsy bits and pieces, but never an offensive game plan and never a decided strategy like we saw against Stanford. I think this is the offense that Mike Denbrock and Riley Leonard are going to be the most comfortable in. I think this is the offense that you can get the most production out of this current group of offensive players. And that includes the offensive line and what they're able to do and not do. And so if we see more of the same from the Stanford game, then yes, I will be convinced that this is what they're going to do moving forward.
So you're not convinced yet. You
No.
need to see at least another game of it, is what you're saying.
Yeah, because we've only really seen one game, right?
One full game. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like some stuff that I've seen in the previous 5, but never like what we saw against Stanford. And so
And it does make me wonder how much of it, because like they've said every week, you haven't heard of as much of it lately, but Marcus Freeman was saying a lot of it, earlier in the year where, like the game plan is essentially going to shift from week to week based on opponent. And they talked about the RPOs being about, well, this is how Stanford runs their defense. And, based on that, that's why we decided on more RPOs. I hope they're not overthinking it because it just feels like that was Riley Leonard's comfort zone. And it shouldn't matter necessarily what the opponent is. It just feels like if you're good at RPOs, then, that travels regardless of opponent. Doesn't it feel like that to you?
Oh, absolutely. And he was clearly very, very comfortable throwing those particular kinds of RPOs because they were throwing RPOs differently in earlier in the season. They were kind of getting to the outside and doing some different things. Now it's like slants and crossers and different things like that. And it looked to me like Riley Leonard was much more comfortable throwing those RPOs than he was earlier on in the season.
Got him in a rrhythm that we haven't seen him in all year.
Yes, absolutely. And they got him in the rhythm with his legs. They got him in the rhythm with his arm. And it was go time after that, right? With everything that he accounted for offensively. And so this is clearly they kind of found the sweet spot, right? I mean, like I said, we've seen things go well. We've seen things not go well, but they haven't been able to build on that. It feels like they found the sweet spot. So let's see how it goes against Georgia Tech on the road, different environment, all of those things. Let's see if they can build on it. If they do it, like I said, if they do it 2 games in a row, man, I think the sky's the limit for this offense and what they're going to be able to do.
I think so too, especially when you look at how the schedule sets up and who they're going to be facing. There shouldn't be a reason that you shouldn't see an offense that's scoring a minimum of 30 points a game the rest of the way.
I would hope so. I mean, I definitely predicted more than 30 points today. So
no, I'm saying a minimum. I'm not just talking about this week. I'm talking
they should
about
be able to. Yes, and you
over
couple
the next
that
6 games. Yeah,
you couple that with the defense that they've got as well. They're going to get opportunities. They're going to get some short fields. Yes, they should absolutely be 30+ point scorers a game. No question about it.
for Leonard himself, like, does it feel like it's always hard to gauge to me? You know, there's obviously been less Riley Leonard shots the last couple of weeks, especially after last week. Does it
Yeah.
feel like the majority are pulling for Riley Leonard, or are they just going along until he has his next bad game?
That one. Like, I'm definitely convinced that
Number
Notre Dame,
2, option B.
Notre Dame fans are just not all. There is a section of Notre Dame fans that are just sitting back and waiting for Riley Leonard to look like crap again.
Yeah.
So that they can jump out of the woodwork and be like, I told you so. He's horrible. He's not a good quarterback. Where's Steve Angeli? Like, that's.
So it's not just me. It's not just me.
No.
Like, we're in agreement here. Okay.
No, it's not just you. It's you just wait. He has one bad game, and here they come. It's going to happen. It's just the people that insist on being miserable in their lives, and they will have that to complain about. Look, they all want Notre Dame to win, and so that's why they're quiet right now, because Notre Dame is winning.
Yeah.
And it doesn't fit the narrative of why they want to be depressed for their whole lives.
Right.
So there's nothing to say.
You literally have nothing to complain about after last week. After Leonard he was the only Power 4 quarterback in the country last week.
Yeah.
Who in regulation passed for over 225 yards and 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and also had a rushing touchdown.
I mean, look.
And he did it in 3 quarters. He didn't even play the 4th quarter.
There's always things to complain about, because people were complaining about the fact that Notre Dame still doesn't have grass anymore, and Under Armour shoes, and all the injuries. And so there's still plenty to complain about, right?
Yeah. But in terms of actual
Riley Leonard,
things that happened on the field, there was like, what were you going to complain about?
Correct. Well, Anthony Knapp still sucks, and all this other stuff. And
I guess there's that.
Look, he had a very poor start to the game. A very poor start to the game. But he made up for it the rest of the way.
No, and I mean, I think we talked about it earlier in the week. I mean, that ultimately that holding call derailed the first drive. They were moving the ball and looking like, hey, because they were around midfield. I think Leonard took off on a run, and that's where the holding call came in on Knapp. So then it's, 1st and 20 as opposed to 1st and 10, probably around the 40, 35 yard line, something like that. It derailed the whole first drive. They ended up punting after that, but things worked out after that, So yes. I just, I mean, trust me, I know you were in part of the mailbag that Trevor and I were doing earlier this afternoon, and we got a ton of offensive line questions about Kirby Lambert and all these different things, and it just doesn't feel like that's going to be an answer this year,
Yeah, completely agree.
So let's talk about Georgia Tech a little bit. Some people are looking at the Army and Navy game as Notre Dame's 2 toughest remaining games. I don't know about you. If Haynes King was playing this game, and again, the reports are he is not going to play. If Haynes King would have been playing, I would have put this probably behind USC in terms of the games that I feel like would be the toughest of the remaining games for Notre Dame. I think the complexion changes, obviously, with King out this week, though.
Oh, it absolutely changes. Look, Army and Navy are Army and Navy, and they're doing really, really well, and I think that's awesome. I feel like, if Haynes King was the starter, for me, it would probably go USC, Georgia Tech, Army, Navy, and whichever order you want to put Army, Navy, and then Virginia. Right? Who else am I missing?
Florida State.
Oh, yeah.
Totally forgot about it.
Florida State is Florida State, and I understand that people want to be more afraid of Army and Navy because of what their record is and what they're able to do. Florida State still has some guys on the roster, but I think that ship has probably sailed where I should keep putting Florida State up high on the remaining games. So I would put them behind Army and Navy as well. But now that Haynes King is out, I put Georgia Tech below Army and Navy.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
I think it changes it quite a bit. And so speaking of which, again, The news being reported today is that Haynes King is not going to play. And I had Chad Bishop on from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. He covers Georgia Tech football. Had him on the show earlier this week. And I'll just go ahead and play what he had to say about King, because he injured his right shoulder, his throwing shoulder, last week in the second half against North Carolina. Didn't play the fourth quarter. Bishop got to watch King in the first part of practice. I believe it was Tuesday. And so here were his thoughts on Tuesday about King's potential availability and kind of what he saw from King in that practice that he was able to see.
My personal opinion is probably doubtful. I think officially from the program is day-to-day. Brent Key was on the local radio on Monday, said he's day-to-day. We talked to him on Tuesday, said the same thing, day-to-day. We were still allowed into practice. We were still allowed to watch him. He was still, in his regular green quarterback jersey, going through quarterback drills, doing the things Haynes King normally does. But he didn't play that entire fourth quarter. His shoulder looked pretty banged up. We don't know what the injury is, whether it's a shoulder or an upper body or maybe, a rib or whatever the case may be. So I don't know. It's sort of a tough scenario because this is a non-conference game for Georgia Tech. I'm not indicating they would rest a player just because they have conference games coming up, because this is a huge opportunity for them. But Haynes King has he's a bright future. He's a kid that wants to play in the NFL. And you kind of look at the big picture of things and you say, well, if he can miss one game and being completely healthy the rest of the way, is that the gamble, right? Or do you throw him back out there in hopes of beating Notre Dame and maybe he injures it further? So I truly think they're going to take it day by day, see how he practices, see how he feels. It could lead all the way up to kickoff where he just says, I can't do this, right? It's not working, and we got to put the backup in.
So was King, when he was throwing, did he look comfortable throwing? Did it look like it was bothering him a lot?
He didn't look uncomfortable. He didn't look comfortable. I mean, he just looked like Haynes King. And the portions of practice we get to see, they're not running team drills. They're not airing the ball out. They're not really going 1,000% full speed. First part
of kind of warm up still.
Sort of that stuff. But the fact that he's out there, in uniform with a helmet, I think is a good sign for Georgia Tech. Again, I really think they're going to play this very, very cautiously and take it day by day, practice by practice.
Again, that's Chad Bishop from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Got to see a little of in-season practice Tuesday morning. I think he said Tuesdays and Wednesdays. They get to see little snippets of practice. So, Vince, this kind of reminds me, and I don't know if you remember this, a few years back when Notre Dame played at Virginia, Brennan Armstrong was the Virginia quarterback. Yep. And this was the same kind of deal. He was injured, and Virginia was having at least, I think, a decent enough season at that point, that kind of along the lines of what Chad Bishop was saying there. This is obviously not a conference game for Georgia Tech. It's obviously part of the ACC agreement that Notre Dame plays these ACC games, but this isn't a conference game for Georgia Tech. And when you're in a conference, you have conference races and things like that, that factor into your decision. So it just feels like, if he is even 80%, let's say, and it's his throwing shoulder, you've still got half a season to go with most of the rest of that schedule, with the exception of your biggest rival, Georgia, at the end of the season being conference games. It just feels like this is kind of an easy decision, as if you're head coach Brent Key, to just sit this guy, let him rest a week, take your chances with the backup, and then you get back into conference play next week, right?
I mean,
okay, so you're in a little different headspace. I can get with that. Go ahead, give me the other side of this.
Oh, no, I'm trying to look at it from like a coach's standpoint, right?
Okay,
and I hate essentially this one doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I'm not saying that that's what they're saying, and they want him to be healthy.
I mean, they do have an injured quarterback to whatever degree. They've got an injured quarterback. So
I totally understand it. But I mean, right now they're 3-2 in the conference. The chances of them making it to the conference championship, I think, are pretty slim at this point. There's literally over half of the conference ahead of them in the standings.
Yeah, but guys, teams are going to be playing against each
For
other.
sure.
I get what you're saying.
For
Like
sure.
if you look at how schedules lay out, Clemson and Miami should play in the conference championship
Agreed.
game. But it has been a season of upsets. So if somebody gets knocked off a couple of times, Georgia Tech, crazier things have happened. If they were to win out their conference game, they could at least be that number 2 team potentially sliding in there at the end. Crazier things have happened.
Oh, look, there's no doubt about it. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around. Well, we'll just get by this one, and then the next ones are the important ones. Like it's hard for me to say that. I can see both sides of the coin, right? I mean, I understand.
So you saying it probably leans more towards this guy just can't go.
Yeah, I think he just can't go. And like if this was a national championship game or something, maybe he gives it a shot, and we're trying to. This will be like the chicken soup game for Notre Dame or something along those lines, right? And Joe Montana. But like, I feel like, they probably are thinking to a degree, like, look, we're probably, within closed doors, not to their team, but within closed doors, the coach is like, look, we're probably going to lose to Notre Dame. We got a chance to win some of these remaining games in the conference, which are more important. If he can't go, let's not force it. And let's give him another week off. Like, I get it. I understand it. I just don't like it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. I've got you.
I get it. I'm old school. It's like, if you can go.
It is his throwing shoulder, though. So, like,
right.
I'm not going to push a guy back considering, it's not like it's his non-throwing shoulder. Yeah, that's right.
It's like a pitcher, right? And if you're going up against a studly team that's not even in your conference, I'm not putting my best guy out there because I might need him later on in the season, and he could really destroy it if I put him out there against this big dog team.
Exactly.
Doesn't matter. And
I guess as Bishop said, they didn't have it confirmed if it was his shoulder, but I thought, that was the initial report, his shoulder, whatever. This is a guy who's thrown for over 1,500 yards and 8 touchdowns this season, just 1 interception, and he's also run for over 350 yards and 6 more touchdowns on the ground. So legit dual threat quarterback. I kind of referred to him this summer as Riley Leonard light. When you look at the passing production, he has obviously outproduced Riley Leonard, but let's be honest, to this point, a lot of quarterbacks have outproduced Riley Leonard, but as we keep saying, he's, it's swung the last few games. That's getting better. But the bigger thing is just the experience, because this is a guy who has played in 30 games, most of them starts in his career, going back to Texas A&M, whereas Zach Pyron, he is less experienced. He's played in 16 games. I believe there's only 1 start that he has against Virginia Tech a couple of years ago. Most of his action has been red zone package guy / mop-up duty type guy. He's 5 of 7 passing this season for just 64 yards and 1 touchdown, 60 rushing yards on 17 carries. So the disparity in experience is pretty dramatic when you go from Haynes King to Zach Pyron. And I asked Chad Bishop, what is the biggest difference between these two guys? And here's what Bishop had to say.
The good thing for Tech is Zach Pyron, the backup, is not a kid. He's been in the program 3 years. He led this team to a win at Virginia Tech in 2022. He's played a lot of football, especially this year. They call him the touchdown vulture because they get in the red zone, they hand him the ball, and he scores from 3 yards out almost, every time. So he knows the offense. He's not going to come in there scared, especially playing in Atlanta. So they sort of have, I'm not going to say the best of both worlds, but it's not the end of the world if Haynes King doesn't play. They have a solid backup in Zach Pyron.
So what would you say is the biggest difference between Pyron and King then?
Experience. Haynes King was at Texas A&M for 3 years, played a ton of football there, came to Georgia Tech in January of 23 and won the starting job in August of 23. And he started every game since, 20 games for the Yellow Jackets. He's played almost every single snap. And I'd say probably 95% of the snaps he's been available since he stepped on campus for the Yellow Jackets. So I think that's what it comes down to. Again, Zach Pyron's played some football too. I think I tallied he's been in 16 games for Georgia Tech. but not, for a full 60 minutes, right?
Sure.
Except for that game at Virginia Tech in 2022. So if you look at it from that standpoint, if Zach Pyron were to play Saturday against Notre Dame, he's taking that first snap, he's taking that last snap. It's a massive crowd. It's a huge atmosphere. It's on ESPN against the number 12 team in the country. That's where the intangibles come in, right? So I think that would be one of the main differences. Outside of that, man, both kids run the ball extremely well. Haynes King maybe has a better arm slightly, but I mean, they were both recruited to Georgia Tech for a reason. They're both good quarterbacks, and I think the coaching staff firmly believes in Zach Pyron, and that's why he stuck around, even though he knew he wasn't going to be the starting quarterback going into this year.
So Bishop stays pretty optimistic going to Zach Pyron. Like, it doesn't sound like he sees that big a deal. I mean, he's seen more of them than us, I guess. But I just have to think that going against this Al Golden defense and
for your first start of the year.
Right. First start in 2 years, second career start.
Yeah.
I've got to think there's going to be a pretty significant drop off. Like, you can have an arm that's similar to Haynes King, but can he make the throws? Can he be accurate? Can he deliver? Can he make the decisions that you have to make as the starting quarterback? And with all of this stuff, I have maybe he proves me wrong. Maybe we look like a couple of rubes on Monday, but I just have to think that this is going to be a really big issue for Georgia Tech.
It's going to be a massive issue. And by the way, in the middle of that interview, I'm sitting there and I'm listening to it, and you asked him a question. I thought you were asking me the question. I almost started to answer it. It's really funny. Anyway, sorry. But no, I wouldn't wish a first start in 2 years against an Al Golden defense. Like, that's it's just not going to go well. I'm sorry. Like, everybody wants, well, what about Northern Illinois? Okay. Northern Illinois. Got it.
Is that what do they actually go? Oh.
But like Northern Illinois was littered with veterans on their team, if you remember, right?
Including the quarterback.
This is not that case. And yes, he can he can run and he can do some things, but good luck against Al Golden's defense, number one. And the guys that are within Al Golden's defense, like the personnel that he's going to be going up against, he's got a good to decent offensive line in front of him. I think they've only given up 1 sack on the year.
That's true.
That's going to change on Saturday. I'm sorry. That's just what's going to happen, because I think this kid is going to be analysis or paralysis by analysis. He's going to be sitting back there trying to figure out where to go with the football, and he's going to get sacked, or he's going to put it up for grabs and it's going to get picked off like that. That's what's going to happen on Saturday. And, again, I just feel for any first-time starter that has to go up against Al Golden's defense.
And I go back to what we were talking about earlier. I think that the key to this whole thing is, can Mills and Cross and Rubio and whatever linebacker is blitzing or stunts, and can they get pressure up the middle? Can they push that pocket back in the face of this young quarterback? Because Ashton Daniels, quarterback Notre Dame saw last week, was much more experienced, and look at the havoc they were able to bring on him. And it started with the pressure up the middle. And they also, Notre Dame just did such a great job with their ends, with the outside pressure, not running past the quarterback, keeping the quarterback in the pocket and letting that collapsed pocket up the middle just get back to him. If Notre Dame can do that again, and again, Georgia Tech will have a better offensive line, but if Notre Dame can do that again, it'll be a really long day for Pyron and company.
100%, because he won't be able to use his legs to get out of trouble and some things like that. Look, he's going to be effective in some short yardage. They'll probably convert some short, third and shorts, or maybe a fourth and short, or if they happen to get to the goal line.
Get it out as quickly as possible.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. But I don't think he's going to pull away from anybody. I don't think it's going to be like a Riley Leonard in the open running the football with Pyron in the open running the football. I think those are going to be two different scenarios. You know what I mean? So, we'll see how it goes. Maybe he has more success than I'm anticipating, but if he was as good as Haynes King, he'd be the starter. I guess that's my biggest point. He's not. He's the backup, and he's got to be the backup for a reason.
Yeah, there has to be some drop off. Like they'll.
Right. He's no Steve Angeli, Sean Stiers. Okay.
All right. They do have a good running back, Jamal Haynes. They average, the team does, 200 yards a game on the ground. The interesting thing, though, is in their 2 losses against Louisville and Syracuse, held to 98 and 112 yards rushing. So basically half of their average in the 2 losses is in terms of running the ball. And again, because of Haynes King and his ability as a runner, I just have to think that it becomes an even tougher task trying to run the ball against Notre Dame's defense when you lack, Pyron can run the ball, but I don't know. What do you think? Do you think that they can have success running the ball against the Irish?
I think they are okay. It depends on what your definition of success is, right? Like, are they going to rack up a bunch of total yards running the football?
By success, I mean a running attack significant enough to keep them in this game.
No, I don't. Okay. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. No, sure. I don't. Because I do think that they're going to try to run the ball more than they usually do because of the quarterback situation, right? So they may rack up some total yardage, but I think yards per rush is going to be the key stat here. I think that's going to be a low number. Does that make sense? Like they may eventually accumulate some more. It's kind of, similar to the Army Navy effect to your run defense, right? Like Navy might not have a whole lot of success against you, but they're going to run the ball every down. And so they may accumulate 250 yards on the ground, but their, average per rush is like 3 yards, right? So that's what I'm referring to. And I'm not, okay. And before people get nuts, I'm not talking about this year's Navy. I know they're undefeated. Like I'm speaking generally about a team that likes to run the football and what that looks like, right? I think there's going to be more of an emphasis for Georgia Tech on running the football on Saturday now that their backup quarterback is in. And so they may accumulate some yards, but I think yards per rush is not going to be anything significant.
I just also think this is kind of a true test for Notre Dame's defense in that even though statistically the numbers will say they have given up some rushing yards, I feel like most of that has come against teams who, like Louisville, for example, Miami, Ohio, as an example, like teams who need to throw the ball, who succeed, who are better passing teams. And Notre Dame has devoted its defensive game plan in those games to at least limiting the pass game as much as possible. And so as a result, teams have been able to have some success running the football. This is the opposite because this is a team that is much more run heavy and is fairly average as a passing team. And I think Notre Dame should be just fine with who they have in the secondary. The guys who are going to be out there, Christian Gray, Leonard Moore, and obviously the guys at the back end. Notre Dame should be just fine with that. And I think that they will essentially load up as much as possible and try to make a young, inexperienced quarterback like Pyron have to throw the football. And I just don't think he's going to have success. I don't think they're going to be that successful in either department.
Yep, completely agree. This is going to be, a defensive strategy for Al Golden in that, look, they're going to take away what Georgia Tech wants to do. And I think it's going to be a focus on the run game. They're going to try to take that away and force them to throw the football, and they're not going to be successful. Yeah, that's just the bottom line to me. I think there's going to be a good amount of turnovers in this game, whether it's fumbles or interceptions or whatever the case may be. I think there's going to be some turnovers, and I hope that number 37 in white is ready to roll because there's going to be a lot of punt return opportunities.
Max Hurleman, baby. That's right.
Yeah. Mad Max.
Tyler Santucci is in his first season as defensive coordinator at Georgia Tech, and they're a better defense than what they had last year. Interesting connection here because he did coach against Notre Dame when he was at Duke with Mike Elko last year, and going back prior to that, he worked under Mike Elko at Texas A&M. So, you kind of have that connection. And in that interview with Chad Bishop, he brought that up, the fact that Santucci has coached against Notre Dame before, last year at Duke. I don't think that has any impact here because obviously you've got a different offensive coordinator now for Notre Dame and you have a completely different kind of quarterback that he's going to be going against. So I don't think there's any benefit to the fact that he coached against Notre Dame last year when he was at Duke.
Zero benefit other than he's going to recognize the gold helmets when they come out of the tunnel or whatever it is they've got there in Atlanta. Is he related to Dan? That's the question.
Good question.
Former offensive lineman.
Former offensive lineman.
Yeah.
That's right.
That's the question I need answered. All right. Inquiring minds want to know. No, but it's great that he has that experience. I don't think it really has any bearing on this game from a schematic standpoint. He's not going to be afraid of Notre Dame or whatever. Okay, cool. But yeah, this is a completely different offensive team than they played against last year. Completely.
Similarity to Stanford last week. They're fairly good against the run. They give up 103 yards a game on the run, 15 more yards than what Stanford was giving up going into last week's game. But they're 105th in the nation in team pass efficiency defense, which is 15 spots higher than Stanford. Neither one of them is very good. And obviously Riley Leonard had his best passing game of the season against Stanford last week. And you're going to have a very similar kind of defense, at least, like from a across the board statistical ranking. So what do you think this all means for the Irish?
Well, I think that what this means for the Irish is they're still going to be able to do what they want to do offensively. This is going to be a situation where if Notre Dame's offense is stalled or stopped, it's Notre Dame that stopped them. And that's basically what happened, last Saturday, that first drive. Why did they have to punt it? Well, because they made mistakes, right? They gave up a hold, they gave up a sack, and they were way behind the chains, and they had to kick it away. The rest of the way, I think they, didn't score on one drive because it was the end of the game. And I forget what the other one was, but it was something very similar. Like the only team on Saturday that's playing football in Atlanta that can stop Notre Dame is Notre Dame. I'm sorry. That's how I feel about this offense. And that's also how I feel about Georgia Tech's defense. Notre Dame should be able to do what they want to do. And if they go about it the way they did the majority of the Stanford game, then I think we're going to see a very similar outcome.
I completely agree. Completely agree with everything that you said. I think that this should be a really good day for Notre Dame offensively and defensively. I don't know what that means considering how good we feel, but because
I know
we have been burned before.
Won't be the first, won't be the last, that's for sure. But, I don't know. It'll be interesting. This is also the first time Notre Dame has been on the road in quite a while. So, what's that look like? So there's definitely some intangibles going into this game, but the way things are kind of shaking out in the pregame, as far as, before the game has kicked off, I mean, without their quarterback and, with some of the setbacks that they've had so far this year, I mean, this isn't the same Georgia Tech team that I thought Notre Dame would be playing after they played Florida State. You know what I mean? And part of that is what we all thought Florida State was supposed to be, which they clearly are not. I mean, remember people were talking about, if Notre Dame loses, it's probably going to be to Georgia Tech. I would ask those people that were thinking that before, do you still feel that way now that
I
we're
wouldn't
here?
think so. I
can't imagine, right?
Yeah. Vince, I will ask you this. Are you ready for rapid fire?
Oh, I love Friday rapid fire. Let's go.
All right. Scale of 1 to 10. What is your confidence Riley Leonard will have his second consecutive 200-plus yard passing game?
No, it's like a 12. I think he did it in 3 quarters last week. I think this is a very similar statistical defense this week. I think that he will absolutely have more than 200 yards. It'll be interesting to see how this game plays out. Is it going to be another 3-quarter game for the starters, or is Riley Leonard going to be able to play the full 4? I mean, if he plays the full 4 quarters, he's definitely going to be over 200. So, yeah, I feel very confident in that.
I am as well. I'll call it a 9. You were just through the roof. I didn't realize you would be that confident.
Why not?
His over under, well, I think I've got it right here. 171 and a half is
take
his
it,
over
baby.
under.
Take
I'm
it.
feeling good about that. I'm feeling really good about 200 because, like you said, like we just mentioned a little bit ago, from a pass efficiency standpoint, Georgia Tech's secondary is only a little bit better than Stanford's secondary last week. Again, we've been jilted before, but I feel pretty good about this. I feel like where Riley Leonard in the offense is trending, this should be an easy over on this.
Yes.
So I'm 9 out of 10. I'll leave 1 just for margin of error. Fill in the blank. Notre Dame getting Josh Burnham and Gabe Rubio back on the defensive line last week is blank.
It's game changing, right? I mean, what did Josh Burnham do with that turnover? What they call it did they call it an interception officially?
Fumble. They called it a fumble officially.
Did they really?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it did it never hit the ground though, did it? Or it went backwards?
I don't know if he technically knocked it out of his hand or,
okay.
The guy's arm was never coming forward.
Yeah, right, for sure. But either way, I mean, look, they were very impactful in that game. I think Gabe Rubio was, I think he had like 23 snaps or 21 snaps, something along those lines, but he obviously caught the attention of his teammates and the way he was doing things over there on the defensive side. So it was game changing in that particular game. And I think, add a little bit more to the workload of Gabe Rubio. And I think Josh Burnham is going to continue to have a good game as well. I mean, look, IB Nation Sports Talk has been high on Josh Burnham since the get-go this year. So that doesn't change, even though he was injured. Let's go, Josh.
It was energizing to get them back. We weren't just going one word, but that would be my word for it. Energizing. Like with all the losses that this team has sustained. I mean, you had 2 significant ones, obviously, at the same Viper defensive end position alone with Patelho and Traore. So to get Burnham back was huge.
Yeah.
Because he's backing up both sides now. And, I think a lot of people think that maybe he should be starting on at least one side. Maybe that ends up happening. Who knows? But then to get Rubio and just that big body, and then, like to hear all the stuff being talked about him, the rolling ball of nails, and, Riley Mills talking about this guy just knocks people on his butt every time you turn around. I think they needed both the energy and that edge that these guys brought back. And, to have that kind of play from Josh Burnham right away, and he ends up with 5 tackles in the game, and then Gabe Rubio didn't pile up a bunch of stats, but that's not necessarily what you're looking for from a guy playing in the middle of the line. It's like you just like that big body. They haven't played. He's the biggest body that Notre Dame has put out there on the defensive line this season. So to get that back in the middle and have that kind of edge, have that kind of energy, I think it was really energizing. And I really do. I think that some of that rubbed off on some of the other guys, or, not that everybody needed that to rub off on them, but I think there are certain guys who needed it to rub off on them a little bit. And I think it did. I think it rubbed off on them last week. Infectious, seeing some of that physical,
like that
energetic play. So, Vince, a listener posted this question on YouTube last night. He addressed it to you. Hello, Vince. Boy. He says, current Notre Dame football team, last possession. Either the offense can win the game or the defense stops the score to win the game. Who do you want on the field? Will you ever say we want the offense on the field?
Well, okay. So
I don't know why he addressed this specifically to you, but
I don't
know if there's maybe things you've said that
I feel like that's pointed. I feel triggered right now.
I know.
No, I was kidding. This is a really good question because the defense. I don't want to dig up this dead body, but the defense was on the field at the end of the Northern Illinois game.
We're thinking the exact same thing.
We got a lot of crap for bringing that up, you and I, because the defense only gave up 16 points.
Right. But they gave up the winning score, and Al Golden conceded. They gave up.
Yes.
They you didn't give up few enough points.
And
And remember, at the end of the Texas A&M game, even though the defense did come up with a stop there, Riley Leonard led the fourth quarter touchdown drive that won the game.
Won the game for
So,
him.
like, if you're going to address this question, we have seen with our own eyes in back-to-back weeks, the offense came through, the defense didn't. That doesn't mean I don't respect Al Golden and his defense, but that's just what it is. In this season, we have answers to both of these questions.
Yes.
But the question is, I guess, what is your answer right now? Like, do you lean on that for the answer to your question?
I do lean on that to answer my question because we've seen it in real time. I mean, I want facts. I want to deal in facts. And to me, the facts are very simple. Look, Riley Leonard can do a lot of things in a football game to just go down and get you points, whether it's using his legs or his arm.
Mm-hmm.
And that also plays into the fact that I think there's also, athletes on offense that can get the ball in their hands and do things. For example, the screenplay to Jeremiah Love. Yes, Riley Leonard had to get it to Jeremiah Love, but then Jeremiah Love had to go and score the touchdown at the end of the Louisville game, right? And so the offense has kind of done it time and time again at this point. And so I'm putting the offense out there. And I know we're going to kind of talk about this on the next question, so we'll lead into it. But I also feel real confident with Mitch Jeter being able to kick a game-winning field goal if you're in his range. So with all those things combined, if it's a field goal game, right, I like the offense being on the field. I do.
I don't disagree with that. I guess, like the only thing that would put the defense into this kind of situation is if the offense isn't playing up to snuff, because that was a factor against Northern Illinois. But
100%.
Again, like if you go back and play out the entire game, the explosive plays that Northern Illinois made in the first half put the defense in the situation it was also in the second half. Like if they hadn't given up those explosive plays in the first half, even though the offense wasn't playing as well, the defense wouldn't have been in a situation where you can't give that up. But I mean, they had their chance and they didn't come through. And again, Al Golden has conceded that point. So I will say this: the defense is only giving up 4.5 points in the second half on average this season.
Yeah,
which is pretty amazing. And that includes Northern Illinois. I think all they got was a field goal in the second half, but unfortunately it was the game-deciding field goal, as it turned out. So Riley Leonard has shown he can do it, and I have confidence that he will do it again. And again, I hate to kind of always have to kind of fall back on this, especially when you look at the teams that Notre Dame is playing. I have confidence that Leonard can do that. Now, let's go to your question about the field goal kicker. Scale of 1 to 10, how concerned are you if Mitch Jeter, the field goal kicker, is out for an extended period with this hip injury that he has?
I am concerned once December hits. That's when I get concerned. They'll be just fine with the kickers that they have for the rest of the regular season. I want a healthy Mitch Jeter for the playoffs. That's what I want. And so, of course, I'm assuming Notre Dame makes the playoff.
Cart, horse, yes. Yeah. We're just assuming Notre Dame's in the playoffs again already.
They don't need Mitch Jeter to win the rest of their games, though, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, they shouldn't.
They shouldn't, right? They should not need Mitch Jeter to win the rest of these games. And so whatever his injury is, he just needs to rehab it and get better and be ready to go for December. That's where I'm at as far as Mitch Jeter being healthy and what they need him for.
Yeah, and I mean, you obviously spun it to, should you need him to win the games? I guess I hadn't really, drilled down that far. I'm just looking at consistency of do you have someone who you can rely on? One, to make an average field goal. Two,
sure.
What's their range going to be? Marcus Freeman was asked that question twice this week, and he didn't want to go there. Either he doesn't know the answer to the question or he's just unwilling to give us the answer to the question. Between Zach Yoakum and Marcello Diomede, who knows what we're going to see. Diomede, as we were talking about earlier this week, a highly sought after kicking recruit a couple of years ago. Got a 5-star from one of the kicking services, but we haven't seen him kick a field goal yet. We haven't seen Zach Yoakum kick a field goal yet.
I mean,
we've seen him in practice, and we weren't necessarily impressed with what we saw in practice.
I don't even remember seeing Diomede in practice. So, because they had 2 kickers going, usually is what they do when we're there, and it was Yoakum and it was Jeter. So, I have no idea what Diomede can do.
I know.
To be honest with you, I mean, you don't just the 5-star ratings for kickers don't just fall off trees. So, I mean, obviously he earned that, but we've never seen him do it in a game, and I think he's listed as the second kicker this week. So, you probably won't see it again. Unless there's another injury.
Yeah. So I guess my number is 7. That's my confidence.
No, that's right.
Or no, concern. I guess concern was this one. What's my concern? So I guess that drops it. If my confidence is a 7, that drops it to a 3. My concern is a 3.
Yeah, my concern is about a 1.5 to 2.
Okay.
Unless I hear that he's out for the season, then my concern level raises.
Scale of 1 to 10. What is your confidence Jeremiah Love scores a touchdown in an 8th consecutive game this week?
Death, taxes, and Jeremiah Love getting in the zone, baby. It's like a 9.5. 9.5. I'll give it a 9.5. Little room for error, but I feel very good about Jeremiah Love getting in the end zone in this game.
I'm at a 9 as well. It's amazing. Like, this is one of those streaks that I didn't even realize was a streak until somebody brought it up earlier this week, and it's like, oh yeah, he has. I mean,
he's really good.
Yeah, he is. He scored from 39 yards out last week, and I think that this, you might as well just book it, bank on it every week. It feels like Jeremiah Love's going to find the end zone. I don't even know what his odds are, but I'm sure they're pretty good.
Right, exactly.
Which Notre Dame opponent is most likely to make the college football playoff this season? Army, Navy, or Texas A&M?
Oh, gosh. This is so hard. So I think the best thing to do is let's break this down, all right? You and me. Here we go. Okay. So Texas A&M, right? Let's look at their remaining games. Okay, so they just got done beating 19th ranked Missouri, and they pounded them, which is awesome.
They did.
But look, Texas A&M hasn't lost a game since obviously they played Notre Dame. So they got 1 loss.
Right. That's why they're on this list.
Right. They got Mississippi State, of course. They got Mississippi State tomorrow. That should be a win. They've got LSU at home.
Toss
up. Then they got South Carolina. Should be a
win.
New Mexico State should be
definite
a
win.
Auburn win.
Should be a win.
And then they close out the season with Texas. I think Texas is the better team there. I would count that as a loss. So you're looking at 2, maybe 3 losses for the old Aggies. Okay. I don't think that gets them in. But if they can somehow, if they beat LSU and lose a close game to Texas, I think they've got a shot. All right. What do you say?
If they can lose a close game to Texas and beat LSU, is that what you're saying?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do think they've got a shot.
Yeah.
In that instance, because when you look at how the SEC is shaping up right now, A&M, Texas, and LSU are the only 3 teams who don't have a conference loss right now. So, like, Notre Dame winning out, regardless of what their schedule is, that still helps Texas A&M in the long run. And I just, like you were saying, like if they can finish with only 2 losses, I think that there's going to be a really strong case for them, especially if that Texas game is close.
Right.
They'll have a really strong case to probably be the 4th SEC team getting in the playoff.
Right. I agree. But they can't lose to LSU.
Right. They've got to beat LSU and then play a good game against Texas at the end of the season.
Both of those games are at home for A&M, which I think is big for them. And so they've got, I like them against LSU. I'm sure that'll be one of the games that we pick next week. but I do like them against LSU. Texas, I would pick Texas over A&M. I don't care where they play that game. But again, if they can keep it close, they got a puncher's chance, right? But then here are the interesting ones, right? So Army, Navy, neither team plays a ranked team
other than Notre Dame
and themselves.
Right.
And will they still be ranked after they play Notre Dame? I mean, that's a debatable concept, right?
Well, and the fact that they both play Notre Dame is significant this year as well, obviously, assuming Notre Dame takes care of business.
That's a very, very, very good point. Man, this is the tough one for me.
And then there's the fact that they could play each other, as we've talked about before, 2 weeks in a row. They could play in the AAC championship game, and then the next week. Now, the selections will already have been made by the time they play each other the next week. But obviously, whoever loses, if they play each other in the AAC championship, whoever loses that game is essentially going to be eliminated right there, assuming they have already lost to Notre Dame at that point.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I have to say, to play a game after the selection, let's say one of those teams gets selected, whoever wins the AAC championship gets selected to be that group of 5 team. And then they got to go play Army or Navy, whichever one. They got to play them again the following week after you've already been selected to the college football playoff.
Right.
That's craziness. That's craziness. I still, at this point in the deal, I will take Texas A&M in this particular question. That may make some people upset. And that's fine. The funny thing is, all 3 of these teams could end the season potentially with just a loss to Notre Dame.
Right. Well, no, there's no way that all 3 of them could.
Because Army Navy doesn't play their game. Yeah. Right. They could go into their conference championship weekend with just a loss to Notre Dame. How about that?
There you go. And I think that ultimately I'm going to give this to Texas A&M because they're in the SEC, so that's going to help them. And again, if those games are competitive, that's always going to help them.
Right.
Again, assuming it's 2 losses and not 3.
Yes.
And if Notre Dame wins out, that obviously helps them. And then Boise State, because remember, it's the highest ranked group of 5 team that gets in. Boise State right now controls their own destiny, and their schedule has UNLV, which is, a more competitive UNLV team this year, and that is actually coming up next weekend, a week from today, actually. It's going to be a Friday night game. San Diego State, Nevada, San Jose State, Wyoming, and Oregon State. So they're the highest ranked group of 5 right now. They've got the best chance right now. So as long as they don't have a monumental screw up, they should be the group of 5 that ends up in there. So I'm going to give it to Texas A&M if they can, basically split their games against LSU in Texas, regardless of who it ends up being.
Dig it.
So let's look at a few game props. Riley Leonard's over under 171.5 passing yards, 62.5 rushing yards.
Pounding the over on both. He averages about 60 yards a game. I know he didn't get to it last week, but I think he hits 200 and I think he hits 62.5. So I will take the over on both.
I'm going over as well. I think I would have put his passing yard total closer to 190 yards. I am surprised it's as low as it is, but I guess just based on his average and the fact that he's only had over 200 once, it's a little bit lower. But again, he's going to face a team that's not great with, in terms of pass defense. So I'm going to go over on that. I'm over on the rushing yards as well. I think that he ends up somewhere probably around 70-ish, 75 maybe rushing yards in this game. Jeremiah Love, 65.5 rushing yards.
This is tough. I'm going to be optimistic and take the over on this one. I like it. I think that he's going to have a decent game here. They are going to try to take away the run, and that could hinder Jeremiah Love. And really the biggest hinder to this whole thing is what is it going to look like between Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price and the carry situation, because they were really feeding Jadarian Price last week.
Twice as many carries.
Right.
Yep.
Does that even back out, this week? It remains to be seen, right? But I will tentatively take the over here.
I'm going over as well because he did only have 6 carries last week, which is still amazing.
I know, right?
Price only had 12, so that's still only 18 between the two of them. But he averaged 8.8 per carry. So I mean, if you give him even 10 carries, he's easily, gonna be over that. So I'm gonna go over 65.5.
Nice.
Receiving yards, Bo Collins, 33.5.
These receiving props are so low. Like, I realize the quarterback is not
just
exactly
daring you to go over.
I know, and I'm taking the dare on most of these. I think Bo Collins is Riley Leonard's favorite target, regardless of what happened last week. And I just don't see a pro like Bo Collins having that performance 2 weeks in a row. So I will take the over on Bo.
I'm going to go over as well. I mean, he's the go-to guy in terms of the receivers. There just hasn't been anyone else who has seen near the volume. I think the only thing that, would kind of change that is if they've, decided to go away from him because of the fumble that he had last week. But I'm going to go over for Bo Collins at 33.5 as well. Chris Mitchell's is 19.5.
That's like one catch, Sean. Like,
he's only been under that number once this year.
Yeah.
That's when he had one catch against Texas A&M. I've got to go over.
Yes, over. Why is it not even 20 yards? Like,
I know.
over.
I know.
Over.
I'm surprised the number's not somewhere around 25.
Yeah.
Mitchell Evans, 21.5.
This one's hard because Mitchell has kind of been a bit of a no-show as far as the passing game is concerned. And, you figure when a guy is struggling throwing the football that he's going to be looking for his big old tight end who's got great hands, and that really hasn't been the case. I would love for them to get Mitchell Evans more involved, but I'm going to take the under here.
Yeah, you read my mind. I've got to go under as well. Now, I mean, he's topped this number 2 different times this season. That was earlier in the year, and it's just been so hit and miss, inconsistent, with the tight end. He had nothing last week. It doesn't feel like Mike Denbrock really is factoring the tight end into the passing game right now. So I can't go over on Mitchell Evans, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Mitchell Haynes, the Georgia Tech running back, has an over-under of 60.5 rushing yards.
I still think they're going to pound the rock. I just don't think that they're going to have the success that they want to have. I will take the under on this one.
I'm going under as well. I don't think they're going to get it. What did Notre Dame end up holding Stanford to last week from a running situation? It was 113 total yards. Nobody had more than 45 yards. Again, Haynes is better than anybody that Stanford had last week, but I think with a game plan, I don't see him getting this against the Irish.
Agreed.
Notre Dame is favored by 9.5. The over-under for the game is 50.5. What is your game prediction, Mr. D'Addario?
Well, I made this prediction fairly recently, but it was still before they officially announced that Haynes King was going to be out. So this is going to be my prediction regardless. I feel much more comfortable with that prediction now that I know for a fact that Haynes King is not going to be playing in this football game. And in fact, I would even consider lowering this a little bit on the Georgia Tech side from a points scenario. I just think that if the offense builds on what it was doing last week against Stanford, and if the defense comes out with its hair on fire, just getting after this essentially rookie quarterback who has never seen an Al Golden defense live and in person, I just don't see a whole lot of success coming Georgia Tech's way, and I see a lot of success, Notre Dame's way. So my score prediction is 49-10 officially, which means I think they cover the spread, and it also means that I think they hit the over-under as well. I've almost got Notre Dame doing that on their own, and I think that, Notre Dame is going to have a very successful day and probably see a lot of 18 handing the ball off at the end.
Yeah, I think that just like last week with Stanford, I think Georgia Tech's best chance to score is going to come on their first possession, especially considering the fact that they do have a different quarterback in there. Even, Notre Dame has obviously done some game planning for him, but it's not going to be Haynes King. I think that maybe they've got a chance, to hit a couple of plays on that opening drive like we've seen from some
Sure.
different teams this season. But I just think otherwise, Al Golden's defense is going to feast against these guys. Might they hit a run or two? Yeah. Might they hit a pass or two? Yeah. But I think it's going to be really inconsistent from an inexperienced quarterback like Zach Pyron. My prediction, 38-13 was my score prediction. So I've barely got it going over the 51. I do have a feeling Notre Dame could add at least a touchdown on that. And I wouldn't be surprised if the point total is a little bit lower for Georgia Tech based on that as well. So 38-13 is my official prediction. I'll go ahead and stick with it, even though I think it could end up being a little bit more lopsided for the Irish because of the quarterback change.
Boom. Big win.
All right. Vince and Company has the post-game show tomorrow.
Yeah, baby.
So be ready for that. Enjoy the game, Notre Dame and Georgia Tech. Vince, enjoyed it as always. I will talk to you next week. Have a great post-game show. Have a great senior day tonight. Talk to everybody next week on IB Nation Sports Talk.